before we actually look at what steps you're going to need to take. So I really like this Venn diagram. I encourage you to take pictures of any of these slides that you think would be helpful for you later. But I like this Venn diagram because this is holistic admissions. This is the process that so many universities like NYU use when we read applications. Of course, first and foremost, your grades are very important. But it's not just that anymore. It's all of these other components of the application. So we can see in academics, we want to see your transcripts showing us all of your grades from high school. We want to see the rigor of the classes you've taken, meaning were they difficult, were they normal, were they easy? And the reason that's important is because we want to see that when you were in school, you challenged yourself based on what's available at your school. I'm not comparing your school to your school to your school. You're laughing because you go to the same school?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not comparing one school to another when I read applications, because that's not fair. I want to first understand your school. What types of classes do they have? What is the curriculum? Because once I understand that first, then I will understand your grades more. I will understand how you performed within your specific school. And so because of that, we're also going to need some information from your school as well, not just from the student who's submitting the application. So that's why rigor of classes is really important. Test scores is another thing we look at, but a lot of universities, like NYU, are test optional. We don't need you to take the SAT. Why? Because the SAT was designed for students in the United States. We're not in the United States. And so that wouldn't be fair for students who are educated in the Panamanian system for us to expect you to really do your very, very best on an exam that was designed for students in a different system. So now we're test optional. You don't have to take that. Some universities are still going to require the SAT though. And so that's why it's very important to understand the requirements of each school you're applying to, of course. In terms of extracurricular activities, we'll look at this in greater detail, but for us, within that, we're looking at what are you involved in at your school, in your community. And then finally, you personally. Here it says NYUAD fit, meaning the fit for NYU Abu Dhabi. There's not a perfect student from our university, but some characteristics we're looking for are students who are challenging themselves academically, who are open-minded, who like adventure, who are involved, who are leaders. Those are characteristics that we look for in your application because we think if you have those, you will be a good fit for our school specifically. So from university to university, obviously that's a little bit different. And then finally, the two other ways that we can get to know you personally, at least a little bit, is through the common application essay that you write, and then also through your letter of recommendation. All of those things I just described combined are what lead us to the holistic admissions decisions that we make. So now let's jump into actually looking at the common application. As you start on that website, commonapp.org, it's important to reach out for support. Talk to Education USA, talk to university representatives like myself or someone from your school to help guide you through the process. We suggest that you use a professional email address when you create your account. What do I mean by that? Maybe just an email address that's your name, your initials, but not like, I don't know, bigprincess@gmail.com. Or, real example, my email address when I was in your shoes was pinkkiwi02@aol.com. Don't email me there, I don't have it anymore, but my counselor said to me, no, you cannot use that. That's going to be on top of your application, your name and then your email address. And that's not the most professional look. I don't know why it was Pink Kiwi, but I do know it was not professional. So good thing I changed it just to my name. So that's why a professional email address is important when you open your Common Application account. It's free to open a Common App account. You can do it today, even if you're a younger student. You can even add information. You can put your name, the name of your school into your Common Application. But in August of your senior year of school, when the website resets for the next cycle, you might lose some of that information. And so that's when you can actually start adding information to your Common App for real, when it's time for you to start building your application. It's August 1 of your final year of school. Sometimes it's expensive to apply to universities. For example, to send your common application to NYU, it's $80 US. That's one university for the application alone. That adds up quickly. If that would be a financial burden for your family, you actually can apply to NYU for free. And so that would be another important reason to contact admissions representatives like myself, so that we can help guide you through the process of applying to our school without cost. Use video tutorials that are on the Common Application website. There's so much support built into the website, and also here in Education USA, and also on YouTube, and also with just quick searches. And so if you ever get stuck, don't stay stuck for long. Just ask for help or look for help. So here we are on the home page of the website. That's what it looks like, Common App. You're going to be applying as first-year students, of course. And so that's how you would want to open your account, as a first-year student. Step one, after you have your Common App account, is deciding what schools you're actually interested in applying to. When I applied to universities, I chose 5 in my home state of Pennsylvania, and luckily for me, all of them were on the Common App website. That was the only way you could apply to those universities. And that's the beauty of the Common App website, is I then was able to apply to all 5 of them with my one application. It saved me time and helped me to stay organized. However, that being said, on this website there are over 1,000 universities. I don't think you want to apply to that many. Actually, I don't even know if you could. In the United States we have over 6,000 universities, so not all of them use this. That's again why it's really important to do your research and understand the specific process for each school. But 1,000 of them are here on the Common App, and so that is really great if those are the schools you're interested in. Our first step after we've created our account is to go to the College Search tab that you see I have selected here. We can filter it. We can look at, for example, only universities in Florida, only universities in Pennsylvania, to narrow down those 1,000 at least a little bit. And then as you find schools you're interested in, you're just going to add those to your Common Application. And it will save that. And so today I can do some research and add some schools, and next week I can do the same. And every time I log back into my account, in the dashboard section and in the My Colleges section, the list of schools I've selected will still be there for me. So for example, here you can see I've selected New York University already, and as it's saved in my dashboard, it has just a quick snapshot for me of the application requirements, the deadlines, and so I can just look to that for each of the schools I'm interested in and know what I need to prepare. Another amazing thing about the My Colleges tab is that, or as the College Search tab, excuse me, is that as you click on each of those schools that you might be considering, it will bring up basic information, links to their website, to their virtual tour, to their social media. You'll see a little bit more detail about the school. How much does it cost to apply? When was it founded? What academic programs they have? And so it saves you time in the search if you actually start your research here on this website, because the basics are there and you can just go through multiple schools very quickly. It's also a good place to start if you have no idea. Maybe perhaps you know that you definitely want a university in New York State. And so if you filter it by New York State, that's a good way for you to see what types of schools are available for you in the New York area. So there's NYU in my dashboard. And after you've completed your research and you're ready to start applying, that's when we move to the next tab, our actual application, the Common App. Let's say, for example, that I've saved 6 universities to the dashboard. Those are the 6 I'm going to apply to. When I come to the Common App tab and I work through these sections, profile, family, education, all of the information that you see here listed under Common App will go to those 6 universities if ultimately I end up applying to them. So that's why this is great. It's my one common application, literally, for those 6 schools. A lot of the information it's going to ask of you is pretty straightforward. Your name, your birthday, your phone number, information about your family. But as international students, there are some questions that might seem a little bit more complicated to answer. And so that's why we can really go through those today. But keep in mind, thousands of international students from all over the world use the Common Application every year. The reason why it's designed, though, for students in the US is because most of the universities that use this website, almost all of them, are US based. Of course, we can still use this website, it's just a little bit trickier, coming from a different system. Next, I want to draw your attention to the Common Application Fee Waiver. This is the last question in the profile section. And it asks me here if the fees associated with the university applications would be a burden for my family. Each university is going to have a different cost. Maybe it's $80 US like NYU, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 20, maybe it's free. But if your family can't pay that, this question is very important for you. All that you need to do, at least for NYU, and for many other universities too, you'll just have to ask them if that's the same case. All you need to do to apply for free is to select, yes, I meet the criteria here. If we look at the criteria of becoming eligible for a fee waiver, there's a number of different options, but actually most of those apply to students in the United States because these are US government programs like USDA Food and Nutrition Service. Obviously they're not applicable here. But if we look at the last one, you can provide a supported statement from a school official, college access counselor, financial aid officer, or community leader. That's the one that we're looking at. That one does apply to you. And what you're going to need to do then is select, yes, I meet the criteria, and then a box will appear, and you just have to type your full name as kind of your digital signature. Later in the application, we're going to add the name and the email address of a teacher from your school. It's different at each school, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's the counselor, maybe it's the head of school, maybe it's the English teacher. But a teacher at your school who's going to be sending us the required documentation for your application. That's the teacher who will send me your transcript showing all of your grades. They'll send basic details about the school. They'll send a letter of recommendation. So what I can do as the student is add their name and email address here, and they'll receive an email that will say, hello teacher, Marcy is applying to NYU and she needs all of these things. But when I check the box that I need a fee waiver, it's also going to add a question for my teacher that will say, teacher, based on your knowledge of this student and their finances, does our application fee present a financial burden for their family? And all your teacher has to do, they don't need to write a letter, they just need to check a box just like this one. Yes, this student is unable to pay the fee, and then you're good to go. You don't need to pay for our application. Okay, so next, that was the profile. In the family section, it will just ask you names of both of your parents, the highest level of education they have achieved, high school, university, depends, and how many brothers and sisters you have. Pretty straightforward, so we'll skip to that section. Now we're in education. In the education section, the first thing we're going to do is add the name of our school using that search tab at the top. When did you start there? Is it a boarding school? Do you live there? Will you graduate from that school? And then the last question that you can see there is about your progression through school. So for example, in the United States, high school is 4 years. How many years is high school in Panama? 5 years. All of the information is 6 years.
They're in a school where it's...
Yeah, we have 5, but normally Panama are 6.
5.
Okay.
Most are 6.
Got it. Good to know.
It's 12 years, but divided differently.
Oh, that makes sense, that makes sense. So, 6 years for most of us, 5 years for some of us. With that in mind, all of the information that you submit in the Common Application, your grades, your extracurricular involvement, your answers to these questions, we are talking about the international equivalent of US high school, which here, you just told me, would be more than 4 years. It would be 5 or 6. All of the information we're submitting here is those 6 years of high school. So I say that because this last question is asking, during your time in high school, was there any change in your timeline? Did you have to take time off for some reason? Did you graduate early? Did you graduate late? If not, no problem. You can just skip that, just say no change in progression. But if you did have some sort of change in that timeline, you just need to explain that here. Maybe I moved, and because I had to move, I missed a semester of school, and it set me behind. Oh, now as we read your application, we understand more of your story because you told us that detail. Now your transcript makes more sense to us. As much as you can throughout the common application, it's very important for you to add what we call context. Add more information so that we can understand the full picture of your high school experience. And so in this space that you can see on the right, that's where you would detail why, for some reason, your timeline was a little bit different. The other questions that you see below that are things like, did you attend another high school? So during those 6 years, was it all in one school? Or was there more than one? If there was more than one, we have to know the name of that school and receive the grades from them. And we also want to know more context. Okay, no problem, but why did you attend 2 different schools? Oh, because my family moved during my second year. Okay, now we understand your story. Next, did you take any university level courses during your 6 years of high school? Maybe a summer class? If so, all we need to know is the name of the university. So next, I want to also talk about the grades section, because that can be a little bit complicated as international students. In the grades section, you can just see it on the right, but I don't have it tapped into. In the grades section, it's going to ask you, what is your GPA, your grade point average? A lot of times, international schools don't have that. And that's okay. It's actually an optional question. So then you would just leave it blank and we would understand your school doesn't have that, no problem. Because remember, we're assessing you or judging your academics based only on your school. It will also ask you a similar question. What is your class rank? And how many students are at your school? So if I say, in my graduating class, there are 35 of us. The following question is, okay, so out of those 35, are you ranked based on your academics, 1 through 35? That's common in the United States. In schools outside of the United States, it's uncommon. And so that's another optional question. And if your school doesn't do that, it's no problem. You can leave that blank. Okay. Any questions so far on the education section? So far, so good. The next section is testing. In this section, you're able to self-report your scores from standardized exams. By self-reporting these, I could say, for example, that yes, I took the Duolingo exam and IB tests, or the SAT, or whatever the exam may have been. It will then below auto-populate, so now you see it added IB and it added Duolingo. So I can go into those sections and I can say, oh, in 2023, in December, I took the Duolingo exam, these were my scores. You're self-reporting. That helps us because we can make a faster decision about you when we have those scores in front of us. However, unfortunately, we still, if you are sending any standardized test scores, we still need to receive official scores from those exams. So you would need to go and have the SAT send your scores to NYU, or have Duolingo send your score report to NYU. But in this section, we're just self-reporting. So that is it about the academics and the education section, including testing. Next, I want to transition into talking about your activities. For me, this is my favorite part of the application, and I think it can also be the most complicated, because up until this point, most of the questions are more or less straightforward. With activities, I like it because we can really get to know you more. We can understand what you're passionate about, what you're putting your time into outside of the classroom. You can see that activities is defined very broadly. It could be arts, music, clubs, community engagement, family responsibilities even, hobbies, sports, work, volunteering. It also could be self-teaching yourself a language. Or maybe you code an application, you build an application. Maybe you start your own side business. Maybe you start an initiative in your school community or in your community outside of school. Activities can be so many different things. And remember, this is from high school, so from those 6 years. If you did something awesome when you were 8 years old, that is so cool, but unfortunately, just high school. Nothing before then. I get that question sometimes, so I have to say that. Some suggestions for this section are coming your way, but I think really just to start off, think back. Think about year one. What were you involved in school? In your second year of high school, what were you involved in? because sometimes it can change over the years. And after you put together kind of a draft of a list, you can begin to add them in this section. For each activity, it's going to ask you what type, and it will give you those categories we saw at the beginning. What was your position? Did you have any sort of leadership role? What was the name of the organization? And then can you describe it? After that, you have to talk about how much time you committed to it. Don't overthink that part. Just answer honestly and do your best to tell us what grades you participated and about how many weeks and hours. Or just weeks. Yeah, weeks and hours. So here's the good stuff. Some suggestions for that section. You're able to list up to 10 activities. You don't have to list 10. For example, I worked with a student a couple years ago who was a swimmer his entire life. He had only one activity, swimming, because he was putting so much time into it. So we understand that. We love it. It's so cool. He was really passionate about that. But sometimes you do have more than one. And so if you have more than one, we suggest that you start with the most significant, which also can be understood as the most impressive. What do you want us to see first when we look at your activities section? What are you the most proud of? That's what should go first. After that, we suggest that you cluster similar activities. Maybe you play football and you play basketball. It looks a little bit cleaner and neater if you add those together. Or not together, but if you add them one after the next in your list. Avoid using acronyms. For example, maybe if you put MUN, we could understand that's Model United Nations. But if your school has very specific organizations, for example, the one I always use is PMMC that I was involved in. I don't think you know what that is. Because at my school, which was called Penn Manor, that was the Penn Manor Math Club. So of course I have to spell out those acronyms in the application. Also, maybe you're involved in an activity that has a name in Spanish. Translate it. Or else the person reading your application, we can't assume that they know Spanish. And so make sure that that's going to be very clear to them what you're doing in that activity. In terms of the description, like the one that you can see here, you can make this section of your application even stronger if your description is measurable. What do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, I was a manager at a cafe. And in the description I just put managed staff. How many staff? Managed 5 employees. Did you increase revenue? Managed 5 employees and increased revenue by 10%. Now it's stronger. Now we understand when we read that what impact you had on that organization. So just like a resume that someday you'll use for a job, it's really important in any part of this that you can, that you're making it measurable. Prove to us what impact you had. Watch your spelling and grammar. It's really unfortunate when we see students whose common application essay is perfect grammar, perfect spelling, and then the rest of your application is a mess. So you should really be reviewing all of these sections that we're going through, especially something like the activities section. Make sure there's not any typos. And don't overload your senior year. Don't overload that last year, because if suddenly you've joined 5 organizations in 1 month, it's pretty obvious to the people reading your application that the reason you did that is to make your application look better. So that's, again, if you're a younger student, good advice that you should be getting involved now if you don't think that you have enough to make this impressive in this section. And the last piece of advice I'll say here is we're really looking for not only breadth, but also depth. Kind of like the letter T. What do I mean by that? Breadth meaning, okay, it's awesome that that student was involved in swimming all his life, but it's also really cool if we see that you're involved in a sport and your church and you have a job. Different things. You're well-rounded. We like to see that type of involvement. And then depth, meaning, well, I played football my whole life. I started as a team member, but by the time I was in my final year of school, I was the team captain. So we see that depth. We see that you've grown and that you, over time, have really made an impact. Of course, this advice isn't going to be applicable to every activity that you have, but when it does apply, those are just some suggestions that we have put together. Next, let's talk about recommenders. This is another section that's going to look different for each university you apply to. Now here in the My Colleges section, you can see that the only university that I've added is New York University. Apparently I'm not applying to other schools on the common application. But if you are applying to more than one school, you'll see all of them listed here in My Colleges. Because after we complete the common application, which ends with that activity section and writing, we can't quite submit our application yet. We have to finish the common app and then come into the My Colleges section to do 3 things. 1, invite our recommenders. So you can see that recommenders in FERPA. 2, questions. 3, submit. You'll have to do those 3 things for each university you are applying to. So let's start with the recommenders. FERPA release authorization. What you have to do there is go in and it will say, student, do you realize that when you add the name and email address of your teacher in this recommender section, they're going to submit documents to our university on your behalf without you seeing them. Documents about you. So it's just a privacy agreement. All you have to do is check a box and say, yes, yes, okay, that's all right with me. And next we're going to invite our recommenders. For NYU, we only require 1 letter of recommendation. You're able to add more than that if you want to. We only promise that we'll read 1. But if there are other people in your life, like perhaps you'll get a letter of recommendation from a teacher, but there's a manager you had at work, or a coach, or maybe an advisor that you had in school. If there's someone that knows you differently that could write a very unique letter of recommendation, by all means, you can send that to us as well. It's awesome to see a different perspective. What we don't encourage is 2 letters or 3 letters of recommendation from people who will more or less tell us the same thing. Because we already have a lot to read about you. And so only make this decision wisely. Only add an additional letter of recommendation if it would contribute more, if it would teach us something new about you. But in this section, when it says invite recommenders, when I click on that, I can add my teacher's name and email address. Something important to note, NYU has 3 deadlines every year, using my university as an example. November 1, January 1, and January 5, for students who hope to begin at our university the following September. As I'm working on my application, it's going to take me a long time to gather all of that, to perfect my essay. Your teacher can be working on your application at the same time. You don't necessarily need to add their name here last. In fact, I suggest that from the beginning you invite your recommender, so that that teacher understands what they have to be doing also. So they're submitting their documents while you're submitting yours. And you can see here that there's a check mark next to my counselor because they've already added their name. And those are the documents they need to work on. They need to submit my school report, telling the university how many students we have, what our curriculum is like. They need to write my letter of recommendation, and then those optional report 2, mid-year and final, those are all times throughout the school year when they can submit updates to my grades. So add the person to write your letter of recommendation. A couple other suggestions when it comes to the letter of recommendation. You should choose someone who knows you well. For example, using myself again, to embarrass myself again. When I was doing my university application, my father was friends with the principal of my school. And he was like, oh, definitely your letter of recommendation for the university should come from the principal. That would be so impressive. But the reality is, I didn't really know the principal at all. It was my dad's friend, not my friend. So do you think that principal could write a really informative and interesting and unique letter about me and my character? Definitely not. It would just have that principal name on it. What matters to us more is that this letter is coming from someone who really knows you well. Someone we say who can really talk about your specific involvement in school, your character, your work ethic. We don't need to read a million letters of recommendation that all say, my student is the most hardworking, the kindest, they're a leader. We want more than that. They're a leader in what? When is the time you've seen them being kind? So your letter of recommendation, just like all components of your application, is even stronger if it's specific. A good way to get a specific letter of recommendation is to choose someone who knows you well, and also to give them plenty of time to write it. I have had counselors email me and say, Marcy, I'm so sorry. My student wanted to apply to NYU Abu Dhabi, but they asked me the day before the application was due to write them the letter of recommendation. And how can I recommend them when they would do something so careless? Not to mention, I don't have time. And that student was literally unable to apply to the university because they didn't have all of the required documentation from their counselor. And so definitely make sure you're giving your recommenders advance notice. And also just kind of a pro tip, it's really kind if you tell them why. Maybe at your school you're able to choose who the letter comes from. And if you are able to choose, you should tell them why they mean something to you and why you think they can really write a well-informed letter about you. So that's the letter of recommendation. We're moving towards wrapping up here by talking about the writing section. So you'll notice now we've jumped back into the Common App. The only other thing that you needed to do in the My Colleges section is ultimately submit your application. In the writing section, not all universities on the Common Application website require this essay. So you'll see at the top the instructions, and then below the instructions it says which universities I'm applying to require it and which don't. The instructions are telling me that maybe, for example, you're applying to some schools that don't require the Common App essay, and so the instructions are saying that if you want to still send the essay to them, you can. No guarantee they'll read it, but you can send it to them. The Common Application essay is really important to us. You're going to need to choose one out of the 7 questions listed here, and write an essay between 250 and 650 words. The questions, the 7 questions, or essay prompts as we call them, usually don't change from year to year. So if you're still a younger student, you can be looking at these and reviewing them now to start preparing for when the time comes for you to apply, because most likely they will still remain the same when it's your turn. If you look at these just briefly, you'll notice that you literally can write this essay about anything. That's what prompt number 7 tells us. Literally anything you want. But luckily we have 6 other questions to kind of provide some ideas, some guidance if you are not sure what might be a good essay for you. You can talk about, going through them from the top, your background and interests that you have, a failure or challenge you faced in life, a belief or an idea that you don't agree with. Why not? Tell us why. Something kind someone's done for you, an accomplishment, or number 6, a topic, idea, or concept that is just so interesting to you, that it's so interesting you had to write about it. Like I have already said, this essay can be so many different things. I was giving this workshop last night, and one of my colleagues said that if he had to write his Common Application essay today, he would write it about a toy car, because the toy car that he had is his most prized possession. Because, it might sound silly, but because he travels a lot for work. And when he started traveling, as his son grew older, his son was about 4 years old, he said, Dad, wait, before your next trip, take my toy car with you and put it in your hotel room, and when you see it, know that I'm with you and think of me. And for him, it brought out so much emotion and so many memories, and it was so meaningful to him that his son gave him that. And so even though it was just this silly little toy car, that's what he would write his essay about. So if we were an admissions committee, and we read that essay, what would we learn about him? That he likes cars? No. We would learn, oh, he must be a really good dad. Maybe we would learn about his work ethic, and that he's a provider for his family. That, of course, he doesn't want to be away from his son, but he's sacrificing so much to provide for them, to support them. Maybe we would learn about how he's loyal and caring. So regardless of what you end up writing this essay on, my point is, we don't care so much about the topic that you choose, but we care what can we learn about you from that. We're already reviewing this essay next to your grades, your activities, your letter of recommendation. We've learned a lot about you. And this kind of brings it full circle, it brings it home. It helps us learn something different, something you choose to share with us that makes you special. We suggest that you edit this essay a lot, think about it a lot, but ultimately when you're ready to submit it, it's going to go in this box. Some suggestions for the writing section. It should be something new about you. Like I said, we've already learned a lot. Maybe there's some overlap though. Take everything I'm saying today as guidance, not rules. For example, the student who was a swimmer all of his life. I definitely already knew that from the activity section. But his essay was about swimming too. As it should be. He's so passionate about it. That was the most important thing in his life. And so he was really able to elaborate on that in the essay. So that's why I say that this first one isn't necessarily a rule. It's your opportunity though to set yourself apart from other applications. It's your chance to introduce yourself. Don't be shy. This is not the spot to be humble. If you want to tell us about an accomplishment or a challenge you really grew through that made you who you are today, don't be shy. This is your time to shine. Especially as international students, this is kind of a writing sample too, right? That's why it's very important to take your time with this and also to ask people to help you edit. For example, when I wrote my essay, I asked my father, my English teacher, and my best friend to review it for me. I only asked those three because I thought they could each offer me a different perspective. When I asked for their guidance, I showed them which of the 7 questions I chose. I of course gave them my essay. I gave them plenty of time to review it, and I asked them to check things like my grammar, definitely, but also my tone. Was the tone of the writing okay? Was it too humble? Was it too arrogant? If they were someone who didn't know me reading it, is there something different about me that I should be sharing? Is it impressive enough that they like it? My English teacher, when she provided me the feedback, it was really helpful because my grammar was horrible, which is why we suggest that you ask people to edit this essay for you. My best friend was also writing her essay at the same time, which was helpful because she really understood the 7 questions and the process. So her feedback was also very valuable. And then there's my father. When he gave my essay back to me, it was covered in red ink like you see in a movie, and he tried to literally rewrite my essay and said, this will definitely get you into the universities. Crossing the line, right? Of course I didn't use his feedback because it wasn't my words anymore, it wasn't my essay or my story, it was from my father. And so definitely ask people to help you edit, but within reason. Another pro tip we have is that if you're telling a story from the past, which is a common way to respond to those questions, it makes it even better if you're able to bring it full circle, connect it to the present you. Maybe you answer about a challenge or about an accomplishment. What matters to us more in that storytelling is these parts, the present and the future you. Not so much the story about what happened. Of course, we need to understand that context, but bring it full circle. Tell us how it shaped you, how you grew through that experience, and how it's prepared you for your future to go off and to be independent. The Common Application essay goes to all universities. Remember, it's in that Common App section. The reason I say that is because sometimes at NYU, we'll receive an amazing application, and then we get to their essay, and their essay concludes with, and that's why I'm so excited to go to Columbia University in New York. That's not us. So just keep in mind that this essay is going to everyone. And finally, this essay doesn't need to be a traditional English class essay. Don't get so caught up on introduction, first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, conclusion. It's your story, it's your style. This is your space. For example, I had a student from Mexico admitted to NYU Abu Dhabi, and for his essay, he wrote a poem. He wanted to come to NYU Abu Dhabi and be a creative writing and arts major. So for him, that was the perfect way to respond in his style. Personally, I could never do that. I'm not a creative person. But for him, it really worked. He was accepted, actually. And so just keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be a traditional essay. There's also 2 more questions in the writing section under additional information. This is the last questions, and they give you the opportunity to, like I said earlier, add more context. The first one is about COVID-19. Of course, all of us were impacted by the pandemic in many ways that were similar. But if there was anything from your pandemic story that was unique or that impacted you in a way that we need to understand in order to understand who you are today, in order to understand the challenges that you went through health-wise or with your education, you can explain that here. My advice for these two sections that you see on the screen is to not overthink them. If you think, oh, this is something that maybe the universities I'm applying to should know, but I'm not sure, just tell us. It's okay. It's not going to hurt you if you use these sections. We're just really trying to give you space here to tell us more about you. So the first one is to tell your COVID story if necessary. And the second one, the question, I'll read it to you, says, do you wish to provide details of circumstances or qualifications not reflected in the application? This can be so many different things. For example, every morning my commute to school, because traffic in Panama is horrific, is 2 hours one way. And so I haven't been involved in extracurriculars because I can't. Oh, now we, reading your application, understand why the activities section maybe isn't as full as other applications. Maybe you found ways around that to get involved on the weekends or something, but you are given this space to tell us those stories. Maybe we need to understand that for 2 months in your third year of school, you were hospitalized. And because of that, your grades dipped. Luckily, you brought them back up. But now we understand as we read your transcript and see those dips in your grades, why that happened. I don't want to make it seem like this is a space to give us excuses. It's just a space to literally, as it says, give us additional information. There's a lot of resources online that can help you understand in more detail how to use these if you are in doubt, so you can always look those up later. And now we will, I think, end here with school-specific questions. So if you've noticed, we've jumped back and forth between the My Colleges tab and the Common App tab a little bit. We're now back in the My Colleges tab to do the second thing we need to do. We've already added our recommender. Now we need to answer questions. And the questions in the My Colleges tab are going to be university-specific. For example, which NYU campus are you applying to? NYU New York City, NYU Abu Dhabi, or NYU Shanghai? Questions like that are going to be specific to the schools that you're interested in. Other questions like, okay, at NYU Abu Dhabi we have 26 different academic majors. Which one are you applying to? At NYU Abu Dhabi we have scholarships based on financial need. Are you going to be applying to those scholarships? So any questions like that that each university needs to ask you, you'll find in this section. So once you have completed the Common App tab, from the profile down to writing, and you've come to the My Colleges and you have invited your recommender and answered the university questions, there's only one thing left to do. Time to submit the application, and you do that also here in My Colleges. Even though the Common App information is the same for each school I'm applying to, ultimately, when you're ready to apply to those, I don't know how many, 5 universities that you've selected, you'll have to apply to each one individually in this My Colleges area. You'll see also under here, the end of this shows us some of the types of questions that you'll find related to each university. Academics, what do you want to major in? Does your family have any sort of connection to NYU? And maybe the universities you're applying to will also have their own essay question. For example, at NYU this year, we've added our own question. It's optional, you don't have to answer this, but in addition to requiring the Common App essay that we've already looked at, we give you a bonus opportunity to tell us even more about you. But this time specific to NYU. It's a long question, but basically it's explaining that NYU is a very diverse community. We need students who are going to be comfortable in that diversity and build bridges and bring students together, build community. In your experiences, how have you done that, and how do you foresee yourself doing that at NYU, being a part of our student population? Writing this supplemental essay that the universities you're interested in might ask you can be so many different questions. It really depends on the school. For example, in the past, our question was, Why NYU? Why are you interested in attending our university? That's a pretty common one. So it's really going to depend, which is again another reason why it's important to know what that application will look like for each of the schools you're interested in. So with that, that's the end of our application, and now just to wrap up with some next steps and things for you to keep in mind. If you are, let's just say, a younger student, not just a junior, what are you doing in this moment to prepare for your final year? Because honestly, I would say my biggest piece of advice of all of this is to give yourself time. This is a time-consuming process that involves more than just you, right? It involves opportunities like this. It involves teachers at your school, Education USA. So give yourself time so that you can really learn through the process. So right now, as we are nearing our final year of school, what can we be doing? Doing your research. There are so many resources out there, it's ridiculous these days. Of course, university websites, of course the Common Application website, but also Education USA, YouTube, dare I say TikTok. There's so many places that you can go to find information not only about the application process itself, but also about the universities you're interested in. And so do that research, not at the last minute, but as you are narrowing down the list of schools that you're interested in, that's when you can finally then focus on each of their applications. What will those applications require? Are there people like myself from each university that you could contact to support you? Narrowing your list down even more, deciding if you're going to need to take an exam like the Duolingo test to send those English proficiency scores. And then also, it's never too early to start thinking about your application essay and what you might want to write. And then for your final year of school, I know this is broken down into the autumn and fall semester and the spring, and here in Panama, your academic calendar is a bit different. So if you're graduating in December, you're going to have a little bit of time off before you start at university if you ultimately choose a U.S. school, right? And so, like I said at the beginning, in your final year of school, the Common Application will be ready for you to start working on it August 1st. You're then choosing a deadline, and those deadlines might be different depending on the school, but in November, December, or January. And so through that time, things we're doing, perfecting your essay, reviewing it again and again, meeting with Education USA. I have actually a couple calls set up next week with students from Mexico, from Trinidad, from Jamaica, who are applying to NYU Abu Dhabi this year, and they need advice on their application. And so again, just encouraging you to contact the schools you're interested in, contact their admissions departments and see if they can support you. And then that's it. Fill out your financial aid applications as well. Financial aid and scholarships, of course, for each school you're interested in, they'll have different types of financial aid available. Maybe it's based on financial need, maybe it's based on athletics or merit, like your grades. So understand what types of scholarships they have, and then how you can get them, right? What you need to do in order to apply for those scholarships. For us at NYU Abu Dhabi, we use a form called the CSS profile. The CSS profile, you can find easily online, is used by a lot of universities as the financial aid application. And so you have to know when those forms are going to be due and what type of information you'll need. For example, on that form, you're going to need a lot of bank information from your parents. And so again, you're not alone in this process. It's going to involve a lot of people in your life to get you through it. So with that, Ms. Lewis, I think I can wrap up here. I'm happy to answer any questions. That is the Common Application in a nutshell.
So I'm asking the YouTube, we have 41 people.
Awesome.
We share it also with our colleagues in Central America. So I'm asking if there's any questions. Are there any questions in the audience? ¿Tiene alguna pregunta? Wanda.
This is just for undergraduate, not for masters.
Right.
Or is also for masters?
Undergraduate.
Okay.
Yeah, which is also an important question to clarify. Undergraduate meaning, do we know what that means?
Licenciatura.
4-year bachelor's degree, licenciatura.
Yeah. I do have a question. We have a number of students that are working on transfer. And I know this session is not about transfer, but I know the Common App has a transfer option. You have, in NYU Abu Dhabi, no.
No.
Do you have any knowledge of where we can find information about common, like for transfer, or should they just?
I'm not sure about that actually, since we don't accept transfer students.
Oh, okay.
But, for example, for NYU Abu Dhabi, all of our students, even if I've completed 2 years at a university in Panama, if later I want to go to NYU Abu Dhabi, I'm still first year student. And so I will use, like we saw at the beginning, the first year student application. But they will need to send, they will need to send their university transcripts
Okay.
with that application.
Okay. So for the students in the audience that are interested in transfer, then we will have more information about that because it doesn't really apply. Do you have any questions? I know you started your Common App.
Awesome.
You want the microphone?
No questions?
I know she has some. Yeah.
So I was wondering, how does one go in the
So you suddenly self-report SAT scores. I wanted to know how that goes when we're applying to individual universities that allow us to go test optional, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, when you're self-reporting any scores, for example, let's say Duolingo or SAT, every university has a code. You have a number at NYU. So if you just Google NYU SAT code, you'll know, okay, in order to send my scores to NYU, I need to give the SAT NYU's code, right? And they'll send those scores. Also, we saw that you can self-report them. So in addition to officially sending those scores, you also can write within the Common Application, I took the Duolingo on this date, this was my score. I took the SAT on this date, this was my score. But for universities like NYU that are test optional, that means you don't need to apply with standardized test scores, and so you would leave that section blank. Let's say, maybe I take the SAT anyway, just to see how I do, and I don't do well. Then NYU is not going to know unless you tell us that you took it, and so you don't have to worry about that section. If you choose to apply test optional, it's not going to disadvantage you. A lot of students, around half or over half, apply test optional. They don't send official scores with their exam, or with their application, excuse me. And the way that we assess their academics is just on their grades from their schools. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
What about financial aid for international students?
Sorry. What about financial aid for international students? Do you offer any kind?
Yeah, so I can only speak specifically to New York University Abu Dhabi, but for us, 80% of our students are international students,
Of course.
almost all of them, and so our scholarships are available to all of them. Our scholarships are based only on financial need, open to students of all nationalities, and yeah.
So we have a success story for Panama. So this is the fourth time Marcy comes and does the workshop for us, but the second time was right after the pandemic. And we went to a couple of schools in Panama, and we have a student, Marco Hernandez, who's actually in his second year of computer science at NYU Abu Dhabi, completely paid by NYU. And Marcy, when she came, she told me we have full scholarships. I kind of did not believe it. Like full scholarship to NYU Abu Dhabi, but they do have. So it's important for those who are watching that it's important to dare to apply, because you never know. And after the pandemic, there are also more schools that are only coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, more schools on the Common App, and also more schools are test optional, which really makes a difference.
The Common App is available for iOS and Android. It can be downloaded, and it's a website also.
Yeah, exactly. And so the Common Application, you can find it, just Google it, or commonapp.org. But also, once you create your account, there's a common app.
Yeah, yeah.
It might be difficult to submit your
Yes.
university applications on your phone, but you can track the
Yeah.
applications, you can do university research on your phone, and so that's a good reminder to also download the Common app.
And the responses are also there for the student to see, like the responses from the university, or that is sent by email.
That's sent by email. Once you submit your application through the Common App, NYU or whoever you apply to, they're going to contact you. For example, they'll say, hey Marcy, we received your application, that's so exciting, but we realize we are missing your high school grades. Please remind your teacher they still need to send that to us. Then they'll say, hey Marcy, admissions decisions are coming out next week, we hope you're excited. Ultimately, they will email me the admissions decision and my scholarship information. So after you submit the Common application, then that's when you'll really start working with the university directly.
Any more questions? So how many of you have started the ones that are here? Is your first time you hear about this? Yes?
Are you seniors? Is anyone a senior?
They're seniors, but they didn't come yet. So
They're in my junior year.
So it's important to start looking early because there's some deadlines coming up for next year.
But
So-
it's not too late.
Another question, but I feel like it's something good to just to like remind everyone, because we're in the digital ChatGPT and AI era. Please do not use ChatGPT or no, seriously, for any of your essays or anything. And also, I remember when I applied and I did Common App, and I did it during COVID, so it was an experience because it was hard to like get the high school committee to like, because you know they have to help you with all the transcripts and everything, so you should order that in advance. And also that I used to have, like I was always scared that, you know, when you do your questions, because you have to, you know, do your essays and the questions that schools ask, you usually, well, what I did, I used to type them on Google Docs or on Word, and then I would like copy and paste. Make sure you're copy and pasting everything like it should be, because that happened to me. So that's just something important I wanted to remind everyone.
Especially as you're working on the essay over time, it should be saved somewhere offline, not just on the Common App.
But you can work on it and then save it. You don't have to
Save it,
feel like you have to finish it all at once. And then you have to go back. I have had students that had applied to different colleges and then they decide to apply to another one, and that's fine. One thing to be careful with, schools like Javier, for example, they don't have a college counselor. And we have that in many schools in Panama. Actually, there's only a handful of schools in Panama that really have a college counselor. So the credits, the transcripts, and some of the letter recommendations have to be sent directly in the Common App. So take time to do this because
Find someone to help you.
they're not going to know. You have to find the right person because schools ends in December and some of the applications are due in January.
So yeah.
So we have a little bit of a challenge there.
Academic coordinator is usually the way to go. Coordinador académico.
But depending on the school,
Yes.
I would go directly to the principal. Really, I need somebody that speaks English and that can help me with this part.
Very important.
Yeah, and for the students, I've been a counselor for some of my students. I've known them. Some of your places are new. So.
I have another question. I'm a parent and my child is still, she has some more years to go, but I'm just wondering after listening, because I do have students, is there a limit of universities you can apply with the Common App? I know it's 20, but that's not the question. It's in regards to the school. Like how busy are school counselors how much work do they have to upload per kid? So if each person in a class of 100 is applying to 20 schools, it's just too much for the school to handle. Like, how much work do they need to do on their behalf, uploading things for people?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a ton of work for your teachers. I think it depends on the school. Like Ms. Gladys said, a lot of schools don't have counselors, and so they're much less used to this process and uploading all of those documents, so it's even more complicated for them. But I think it depends on the school.
So each school would have its own policy in
Yeah.
regards to how to make schools they
Exactly. Yeah.
I've heard some of the school counselors that they say pick 10, because some of them have fee, some of them you can apply for a fee waiver. I know we're doing this with every with that, but the truth of the matter is that, you're not gonna put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
So, and even if you apply for it, you have to apply to different campuses too,
Yeah.
you have that option. So, I would say it's a process. We do have a way of narrowing down options so that you do, higher reach and then some that you could get in, and depending on the financial aid. But I would advise on not applying to too many. But it depends on the student, and it depends on what they want to study. And that part is very individual. So are we good? And do we have any questions today? Usually when we do this by Zoom. This is the first time we're doing it with YouTube. Every time Marcy comes, we'll do something for the first time.
No, we don't have any more questions
You don't
in
have
here.
any more questions or comments? Okay, any more questions or comments from the audience? So with Education USA, I'm going to go ahead and plug my computer again, but we do have Mondays and Wednesday essay writing and also TOEFL writing preparation. So I recommend that regardless of when you want to study, if you want to start here and then transfer, or if you want to apply, if you're doing undergrad or grad school, the courses are free. If you're in Panama, Chiriquí, in Herrera, and Los Santos, or studying undergrad in the U.S. and applying to grad school, it's helpful. Even if you have a good English, you can never, you could always learn from the fellow. His name is Mahmoud, and he has a doctorate degree in education in English writing, and he's out of California. So it's for free. You log in via Zoom. It's Mondays and Wednesdays from 4 to 6. So make sure to register. Every information is Education USA PTY at the Instagram. So make sure you sign off before we head out. There's for the folks that came in person, there's some snacks and little sodas in the back.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.